Here we come, blue and white, and we're looking good. You'll be in for a fight, and we fight pretty good. Getting goals is our job, and we get goals good. Looking good, we are Carlisle United.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Brunton Bugle, the number one podcast dedicated to all things Carlisle United. I'm Lee Rooney.
And I'm Dan McLennan.
And on this special episode, we'll bring you the instant reaction to the news that Keith Millen has been appointed the club's new manager, ending the 2-week search for Chris Beech's replacement in the hot seat.
17 days.
I'm going to do that again now, aren't I?
No, I've just put it in as a joke.
Not 17, it's 16, isn't it?
No,
he was sacked on the Sunday.
On the Sunday counts, day one. Day 17 in the CUFC boardroom, and Andrew passes David a custard cream.
Wouldn't surprise you, would it?
No.
Well, there you go. So, yeah, 17, 16 days, whatever you want to argue, after Chris Beech was given his P45, United have finally appointed the new man in the hot seat. After, I think it's fair to say, a few false starts in the process, if some of the whispers we've heard are true, Dan. So Keith Millen was this afternoon unveiled as United's manager. No, not head coach, manager. We'll touch on that in a little bit. On an 18-month deal, Millen will take charge of the team immediately and will work with the existing coaching staff. We're going to sort of discuss over this sort of short episode a bit of our sort of initial thoughts on Millen's appointment and actually the process that led to him being appointed, because we've got our thoughts on who we thought should have got the role and some of the names that were sort of coming into the process towards the end. But it's a big job, isn't it, for the man who's been charged with getting us away from the trapdoor towards non-league football?
It is. It's and as we're going to look at later, it's not the easiest of starts, is it?
No, not at all. He's got a bit of a tough way to get going at the start, I think it's fair to say. Well, let's start then, Dan, talking about the recruitment process. So obviously Beech was sacked on the Sunday, wasn't he? And as ever, the bookies got their markets up very quickly, didn't they? Now, as me and you both know, what the bookies have, they have generally a standard template for most clubs in each division, don't they? Basically, what they have a standard template of if a manager gets sacked at League One level, there'll be certain sort of managers who will be included in the list. And what they then do is they throw in a few names that maybe have recently lost jobs elsewhere, and possibly some like club legends, don't they? That they've usually carried over from the previous list they had on.
Yeah.
And we were no different really, where you had your usual ones there. Zico Ronaldo was in there, Michael Bridges. You obviously had Danny Granger in there. Obviously, the caretaker's always listed there as well. And I think a few people rinsed that when Graham Kavanagh got the job, didn't they? I think he was 20-1 or something still, wasn't he? Towards the end. So, that started to filter down a bit though, didn't it? They started to... Some of the very unlikely names, the odds just got higher and higher, didn't they? They were never really likely to get it. The first name that really jumped to be odds-on favourite, Dan, was John McGreal, wasn't it?
Yes.
This one was about last week, round about, maybe not this time last week, but towards the end of the week, wasn't it? Maybe Wednesday, Thursday. He suddenly became odds-on favourite, and it had clearly emerged that he had been spoken to at the very least, hadn't he?
I was speaking to someone. I went down for my FA Cup tickets today at the club, and the person I was spoken to had to leave the Tranmere match a couple of minutes early because they had something on. And as he left, he bumped into John McGreal at his car and said to him, "Scouting today, John?" And he just sort of laughed. So he was certainly in the mix. There is rumours he was possibly close to it mid to late last week, as the odds suggested. But then, if that is true, cold feet appeared either on one side or maybe even both, and for whatever reason it didn't happen.
Yeah, the suggestions I've heard is that Holdsworth was actually quite keen on McGreal, and to be honest, he kind of made sense as the candidate to me. I mean, he's managed at this level for a few years. He did pretty well at Colchester, especially working with young players.
I think he can scratch off his Swindon experience in the summer as well.
Just don't even look into that one, because at that point they really were a basket case. They've obviously sorted themselves out since then, but then they were just a mess. But the reports I've heard are that Jenkins wasn't keen, and one of the issues might be related to the fact that he's he's managed down south so far. Actually,
Yeah.
he's been living down south for a long time. Obviously, being at Ipswich and being at Colchester. So
I think one of the problems with that as well is if you've got a target who plays down south, and say for instance, John Smith of Gillingham becomes available. Carlisle offer 1,200 a week, and Bristol Rovers offer 1,100 a week.
yeah,
A Southern-based player is going to go to Bristol Rovers for 100 quid less because it's
Probably,
3-4 hours needed to home.
yeah, you'd imagine that would be the case. But I mean, that said, I'm sure he had some contacts up north at the very least. It seems
You would think so.
seems a little bit ridiculous if that was the real thing. Obviously, then it emerged as we were recording last week, didn't it, Dan? That McGreal pulled out. So that sort of left us in a bit of a sort of situation where we weren't exactly sure who it was going to be. There was still sort of murmurings, oh, could it be Danny Granger? I don't think he was ever realistically in for it, to be honest, based on what we've heard. Eventually, we got down to the two Keiths, didn't we? Keith Millen and Keith Hill. They emerged as the main candidates. Now, Hill was an interesting one because you first thought, well, are we just going from master to apprentice here? Sorry, apprentice to master even.
Yeah.
You know, obviously having been, Chris Beech's boss when he was at Rochdale. It should be noted, actually, though, that Hill's worked with quite a few different assistants, I think, at Rochdale. Beech wasn't assistant the whole time. I think he might have only been assistant for maybe 2 years there, possibly.
Yeah, he was just a coach at some point, wasn't he?
Yeah, and a youth coach as well. So I wouldn't read it quite as much into that in terms of the loyalty side of things. Now, when Hill's name was mentioned, some people were like, oh, God, long ball football, look what, ended badly at Tranmere despite the good results. But he kind of made sense, didn't he, as a potential candidate, I think. And someone who knows the division, has got out this division twice with Rochdale, would certainly be able to pick up a few players of his contacts in like the Manchester area and stuff like that. So he kind of is one of the ones you thought, well, of all the names that we mentioned, you could do a lot worse, couldn't you?
Yeah, and I think a lot of folk were really focusing on how it ended at Tranmere for him last season when he was released as they got in the playoffs. And something's clearly went on there, which we're not privy to. If you look, and when he was at Bolton, it was a bit madcap, wasn't it?
That was before they got themselves sorted out, so again, not one really to take seriously.
Really, you've only got sort of his Rochdale achievements, which, for the size of club Rochdale are, no disrespect, were bloody impressive.
Yeah, really impressive. Like I said, it's one of those ones, I think, if you'd gone back to when Keith Curle was appointed, for instance, and instead of announcing Keith Curle, they announced Keith Hill as the new manager, I think most of our fans would have been delighted, wouldn't they? Would have gone, brilliant. That's a great appointment. Someone who's done amazing things at Rochdale, playing not too bad of football, a little bit long sometimes, but what manager isn't? And, I think most fans would have been quite happy back then. Now, a little bit of water under the bridge even, and people maybe wouldn't have been as keen, I don't know, but there you go. Obviously Millen emerged. We'll talk more about him in a minute. There's no point in talking too much here. But then another name came up, didn't it, Dan?
Yeah. Which one do you want to do first? The ex-manager?
No, let's do the one that everyone was just like, no, God, no.
Yeah. Darren Sarl of Yeovil from nowhere went quite short in the betting at one point, and there was people thinking, Yeovil are playing tonight as we're recording. We'll be waiting for something to happen after they'd played, and Yeovil fans' reaction was, please, 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 take him, we'll drive him up, which doesn't bode well. They finished 16th last year.
They're 15th now, aren't they?
15th
won in
this
8.
year, and they haven't won in God knows how many, so...
It was straight away, that appointment would have turned the fans...
Oh, yeah.
Totally against the board. And
yeah.
I
don't think it would have been so much against Sarl as a person. It would be more against Sarl as where he is in his career, etc.
Yeah. It's just the concept's probably the wrong word, but it's the semantics of the appointment. That was what would have annoyed people. It would have been like, why the hell? It's like, I don't know, Leeds sacking Bielsa and going for someone who's struggling down near the bottom of the Championship.
Yeah,
wouldn't make sense, would it? It's just bizarre appointment it would have been. I'll be honest with you, even if he was interviewed, I've got severe reservations about that. If we've decided to interview Darren Sarl for the manager's job, it makes so little sense.
Yeah,
and I think sometimes too much is placed on how well someone interviews for for these
Yeah.
jobs. Sometimes you've got to be really careful.
There must have been a reason why he got bet. So whether he's applied for it, knowing that it would maybe cost a club money to take him away, we don't know. But
I mean, to go that short, that late on,
it suggests he was in the mix.
It does, doesn't it? I haven't put this in the running order for you, Danny, but I've got to mention it as well. Our old friend, Mr. Clark, he put his name into that, didn't he?
I think Lee Clark, who is always mentioned when the Carlisle job comes up, I think he's used a favour from a journalist friend, hasn't he?
Well, he's just been sacked from a job in the Sudanese Premier League, hasn't he? So.
Yeah, there was a story in the Football League paper, which is a great little read on a weekend, and it was basically, come and get me, I'm available, and everyone went, no thank you, turn the page.
You're right, mate, cheers.
Yeah.
Well, let's touch on the one that sort of came up towards the end of last week, and people were like, oh, I think a lot of people sort of, in terms of betting on this one, were sort of thinking with the heart rather than the head, weren't they?
Yeah, it was a romantic angle, wasn't it?
Indeed. Paul Simpson, obviously, he's left his role. We'll cover that in the X Blues this week. Left his role at Bristol City. Now, there's a report he's going to an advisory role at Ipswich or something like that, possibly. But, yeah, people getting, oh, God, go for him. And obviously, Lummy on the radio at the weekend was saying, obviously, Lummy knows him well, was saying, like, just at least speak to him, see if we can get him involved or whatever. And for me, it's a little bit of a no-brainer for the board to at least speak to him. At least see where he's at and say, do you reckon you'd be keen on this? I know there's some reports that he went for the job again, didn't he? I don't know which time it was, but went in for it and was a bit annoyed about the interview process and how it went. And maybe he's not so keen on coming back for that reason. But I know you've got your reservations.
On the flip side, some of us are annoyed at the way he left the club. So
True. But in terms of just someone who probably would lift the majority of fans, or someone who knows the division.
Something that was also bandied about was he could have went full circle and become Dennis Booth, because he had Dennis. He had his Dennis Booth as his old head beside him. You could actually see that in a couple of years when the time comes again.
Yeah. Obviously, he's recovering from his cancer operation as well, isn't he?
Yeah. Although there was a Bristol Journal did tweet that his departure was nothing health related. So
no, but I can't imagine it'd be easy going straight back into it. Into full-time working. So it's one of those ones. But honestly, if we decided to stick with Skelton, I would have been quite happy if we at least said, well, Simmer's going to come in and assist until the end of the season or something like that, and help him in terms of that sort of thing. But wasn't to be. So from those final threes, it appears that it did appear, didn't it, at one point of the last day or two, that it looks like Hill was going to get the job. But then earlier today, the odds started to tumble, didn't they, on Millen?
They started slowly, then around 3 o'clock they really picked up, and he went from sort of 3-1 to 6-4, even money 1-2, and I think he was last at 1-12, and it got suspended. So
yeah, it was.
And then it was literally announced 10 minutes later. So
yeah, it was always going to happen at that point. So yeah, there you go, Keith Millen. That's how we ended up with the man in the job. Initial thoughts on this one, Dan. What's your initial thoughts off the top of your head?
When Beech went, he probably wouldn't have been in the first 50 names I could have said.
Yeah,
which isn't a slight against him. Just
to be honest,
no reason for him to be.
To be honest, Beech wouldn't have been in the first 100 names. You would have mentioned after Presley, would he? So
yeah, but no, he certainly wasn't in there until his name appeared about a week ago. He sort of appeared in it.
Yeah.
He's not got much management experience, but he's got a wealth of coaching experience. So he's not some sort of novice, And I know he's done several caretaker spells, which aren't the same as full-time management, but he knows his way around the training pitch, and he obviously feels as though he's got his own enough knowledge of our league and our squad. He's obviously. There was a rumour that as part of the process, they had to do what they would do with our squad, and so he's obviously I don't know if he's watched the games himself or he's You know, they can use all sorts of tools these
It's
times.
pretty obvious. Get a striker in as soon as possible.
Yeah. An experienced centre-back and a striker, please, yeah. Because it's quite funny, because I've talked to a couple of folk in the last couple of days, and the consensus seems to be we haven't got a terrible first-choice 11. It just needs a couple of older heads in it. You know, I mean, going a little bit off topic, but Howard going into goal is just, you know, he's experienced, he talks, he's not steadied the ship, but he's certainly, you feel a bit more comfortable. And, you know, would it be a surprise to see a Clint Hill or a Anthony Gerrard type come in January? No, I don't think so.
I'd rather have them before January, to be honest.
Yeah. But we could be looking at lists of former Crystal Palace players, etc., because he's obviously well thought of. But no, he's, you know, he was never one that would have entered most fans' minds. But as always, me personally, every manager gets a clean slate from me when they come to Carlisle. Even Keith Curl did once. People will be shocked
did he
by
really?
that.
Did he really?
Did for a couple of weeks,
a couple of weeks. No,
a couple of months, to be fair.
That's
but no, clean slate, and all we can do is wish him the best of luck, because he bloody might need it, eh?
Yeah. Well, before I sort of give my sort of views on it, let's hear what Mike's got to say. Mike's obviously busy working today, so he wasn't able to join us, but he sent me a little voice note with his initial thoughts.
It's hard to comment on him as a manager, because he, you know, there's not a lot to go off there. Obviously, he's had his caretaker spells, but obviously they often happen when someone else has been sacked. So it's wouldn't be fair to comment there. But it seems to be a decent coach. Probably has good contacts. Does he know a lot about this level? I don't know. But I've got reservations about him being mates with Holdsworth. Like, will Holdsworth be able to sack him if needs be, or will we have him for longer than maybe we should have if things aren't going right? I don't know.
Interesting point there from Mike at the end. I will get onto that in just a second, actually, after I give my views. My initial thoughts are just not very an inspiring appointment, to be honest. It kind of feels like I think they've probably avoided a bit of a hand grenade in appointing Sal as manager. I think that would have been off the charts. The reaction to that would have been astronomical, I think.
It's a good job we're away on Saturday, is all you would say for that one.
Yeah, exactly. I think of the final three that it seemed to be down to, just guessing off the odds and stuff like that, Hill's probably the one that would have got the best reaction, I think. Most people would have done pretty well at this level in the past, good contacts. You know, maybe slight reservations over the whole, we'll just be like another Beech. But I think most fans probably would have got the head around that one, I think, eventually. It's just meh, isn't it? It's just I don't know. It's kind of like I totally get that he's a decent coach, and he's reportedly very good at working with young players. I'll mention that when we talk about some of the pros and cons. But his record as a manager at Bristol City was pretty dreadful, and his record in his last job he just had in Sweden wasn't good either. I know it's a totally different setup and stuff like that, but it doesn't in the main role. It doesn't overly inspire you. Basically, is my first thoughts. Like you, I'll back him and I'll give him as much support as I can, but it doesn't 100% fill me with confidence. It strikes me of we're trying to do exactly the same as what we did with Beech and pick someone who's a bit different, someone who works well with these younger players, rather than actually just picking a good manager. That's the bit that worries me a little bit. Just a couple more things before we talk about the pros and cons, Dan. Touching on something Mike mentioned at the end of there about obviously being Holdsworth mate, so to speak. A lot of fans in their reaction, I'm looking online on social media and stuff, are already using the jobs for the boys.
Because they played together at Watford in the late 80s.
Exactly. As you spotted last week when we were messaging, weren't you? When his name first emerged, you messaged me and said they played together for Watford for a few years, and you thought, oh. Yeah. Now, Holdsworth has said on the official website that he hadn't seen him in over 20 years. I'm not 100% convinced by that one myself, but if that's what he says, that's what he says.
I think by that he means not as in to stop and have a proper catch-up.
Yeah.
Because the law of football, when you're in these roles, you're bound to have bumped into each other at a match or you know, even if your own teams are playing each other or something, you know, you would think, wouldn't you?
You would do. Yeah, it's noticeable the fact that the photo on the official website is Nigel Clibbins with Millen and not David Holdsworth.
Yeah, David, why are you not on that picture?
Considering David Holdsworth's the man who's led the process from the start, by all accounts, who's the one who's taken the names.
Well, I'm just going to interject here.
Go on.
Kiosk, in their briefing, mentioned that Nigel Clibbins was leading the process, managing the process. What I think is it's a combination of the two, in that Nigel Clibbins, as chief executive, has probably organised times, dates, places, interviews. David Holdsworth, as director of football, has probably gathered the long list into the short list.
Yeah.
Then sat down with the board and the chief exec. I thought that was a bit cheeky of Kiosk, the way the...
Yeah. Especially considering Holdsworth was the one who was basically saying he was leading the process. It's a little bit naughty, that. But I mean, I think he probably is going to be a little bit harsh on Millen to say his job for the boys. I'm sure he gave a good interview and I'm sure he impressed the thing. But the simple fact is that tag's there now and people are already saying it. And it's going to be very difficult for him to shake off. If he goes in a bad run and there's Holdsworth sat in the stands and we stick with him for too long, as let's be honest, we did with Beech. Beech should have been sacked probably 2 or 3 weeks before he was. There's an argument he should have been sacked towards the end of last season, to be honest. Because I don't know, people use the COVID excuse, but some of the excuses he was coming out with and some of the performances weren't great, COVID or not. So there's an argument. We stuck with Beech for too long. We can't afford, if things go wrong with Millen, to stay with him for too long. I hope they don't, but that's one thing we've got to be very, very careful with, haven't we?
Yeah.
In this process.
Yeah.
The job title, Dan, we mentioned that just earlier on in the episode. He's manager. He's not head coach. Interesting twist.
I don't think there's too much in it personally.
Possibly not.
Because, as David Holdsworth was at pains to point out several times recently, Chris Beech picks the players. David Holdsworth then negotiates for those players. Yeah. And that had been the script from day one. Maybe it's just Millen's more of a traditional, and said, I'd like to be called manager, please.
Yeah, maybe because he's a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, and has been manager before. He said, I want to be called manager. Yeah. Maybe he does want a little bit more power on those sort of things. Maybe they just feel it makes more sense to call him that.
Or maybe he wants to be in on the negotiations alongside Holdsworth.
It might be a sort of training ground thing as well. Maybe it's to put a bit more authority.
You've got the impression that Chris Beech would maybe do the initial meeting, but when it came to money, he'd just walk out the room type thing.
Yeah, but I'm thinking with the current squad, I do wonder if it's a thing where maybe he's looking at it and thinking, I want to have a bit more authority over these players. Yeah, maybe feel that Beech didn't because he's head coach rather than manager, and he says, well, I'm manager. Yeah. Basically, I make final decisions on stuff, whereas maybe the players before thought we could just go to Holdsworth above the head coach's head. It's just maybe that's just the way it is. We don't know that one. It'll be interesting to see if John Coleman or James Phillips ask a question about that one. I think it might be worth looking into. Interesting quote in the press release as well there from Andrew Jenkins, wasn't there? Saying we feel he has the approach that our players will respond to. I mean, we didn't expect mass changes anyway, did we? In terms of players going on in.
It wouldn't happen until January anyway. What the squad have got is 2 months to prove their worth before January comes.
Yeah, definitely. So it does suggest they've looked specifically for a manager who maybe can work with a squad like the one we've got with younger players, rather than just looking for the best possible manager. So you could probably look at that as a positive, I guess. Maybe it's a bit more thought-led process, really, rather than just going with who's the best available. Let's quickly touch on some of the pros and cons and some stats then, Dan, before we finish up. I picked out a few pros and cons here. You might have some others that you might want to share. You might disagree with some of these. In terms of pros, he's generally a well-liked person at his former clubs. Even at Bristol City, after his poor managerial spell there, he's still a well-liked character, isn't he? He was an assistant, I think, and a youth coach there for a while, and obviously a player.
Yeah,
he does, especially Palace. You know some Palace fans, don't you? And he's a very well liked person.
One of our regular listeners, Brian, messaged us earlier. He listened to a lot of football podcasts, and one of the Bristol City podcasts did a really long interview with him over the summer. When this is out, we'll dig for it and retweet it, and I think that'll probably give quite a good insight into what sort of a bloke it is. And yeah, my mate Carl, who's a big Crystal Palace man, very well connected down there. He says he's meant to be a really, really well liked A1 type of bloke. You know, could that be too nice for a manager? We'll see.
Oh, you're jumping ahead to be cons there, Dan. Steady on. But yeah, he's reportedly a very good coach with young players as well. I think that's something at Palace that was spotted, wasn't it, in his assistant role and he worked with the academy there. He's someone who's, because there were quite a few young players come through down the years, haven't they, at Palace? And I think he's well thought of in the way he coached them. So, if that's the way we're continuing to go in terms of our philosophy, then someone like that, I suppose, makes sense to get in, doesn't it? I suppose in a sense it's a clean break, not someone on the managerial merry-go-round, is it?
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar in a sense to, in a weird way, almost to Keith Curl, isn't it, actually, when you look at it? In manager, one club for him, Curl was at a few clubs, didn't do that great, went off and became an assistant at a London-based club, funnily enough, and then actually has come back into doing coaching or managing on their own.
I would say more akin to Presley than Curl.
Maybe Presley had a few clubs as a coach too, hadn't he? But I'm thinking more like
he's also been abroad, which Stephen Presley had been.
That's true. I suppose there's a mix of the two, really.
Which is one of your further pros you're about to come to.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, so I think it's a bit of a mix of the two, isn't it? Almost, you'd say, because if you look at it, Curl had that long gap between being manager in two spells. I think Chester and us was about 8 years. I think it was, wasn't it? I think between the two. Because he was sacked as Chester manager, wasn't he, Curl, after we beat them 5-0, I think, in 2006. So, yeah, it's one of those ones. He's not a managerial merry-go-round one, which is, I always like that. But then again, it's not always a bad thing to go back to the managerial merry-go-round if there's someone there who's good enough. As we said before, plenty of contacts, hasn't he, at top-level clubs by all accounts. Because he's well-liked, people maybe are more likely to do him a favour and lend him a player and stuff like that. So there's another one there. And the final one I've sort of picked out here is he's tried different things. I mean, you sent me an article, I think it was on the ITV website, wasn't it, about his move to Sweden. Obviously, he did that 2 years ago. I didn't realise he was actually been there that long. He went originally to be assistant manager at Halmstad. I think one of those sort of clubs that a lot of English players or English coaches and players go to, don't they, and get involved in.
Roy Hodgson effect, wasn't it?
Roy Hodgson effect there, yeah. And I think them and Ostersund, isn't it, where obviously Brian Wake's been at. Yeah. They've got quite close links with English contacts. So, and obviously then he had his job at that club that I'm not even going to dare to pronounce. Maybe I'll have a try it later if you want to have a try, Dan. But yeah, he's tried different experiences, and you never know. He might have spotted a couple of, unpolished gems out there, that you can.
Do you mean Orgright?
Orgright, there you go. That's what we'll go with.
Sounds right, doesn't it?
Sounds about right, yeah. So yeah, there's pros there. I mean, look, you could probably do a lot worse than him. I think Saar would have been a lot worse of appointment in that sense. In terms of cons, as we mentioned this before, reportedly, one of the reasons he struggled to get managerial roles in the past is that he's too nice. And there's a feeling that he's not quite ruthless enough to be the main man. He's a great coach and a great, sounding board for a manager, but maybe not the right guy to. At the moment, we're in a difficult situation that we haven't got many experienced heads in our squad, so it's difficult for a manager to come in and rip into the place. So in a sense, that might be a good thing that he's nice, that he's going to come in and maybe try and just boost their confidence rather than tear into them, like a Sheridan type would, for instance, maybe. I mean, could you imagine John Sheridan with this squad? I think he'd be in one day and out the next. So yeah, that's one concern there. Is he too nice for the job? Not sure. His managerial record in full-time and caretaker roles has pretty much been dreadful, hasn't it, Dan? That's one big concern.
He's around that sort of 33% mark, which is very similar to Presley, to Beech.
Yeah.
But 6 of those spells in English football, anyway, were as caretaker.
Yeah.
And I always think you can't really judge on a caretaker spell.
It's a tough one, is it, to judge a caretaker? I think it's fair to say.
I mean, he did well in his second caretaker spell at Bristol City, which led to him getting the job full time. But then he was just so there, wasn't he?
I mean, looking at his record here, 57 games, 18 wins, 12 defeats, 12 draws and 27 defeats.
Yeah.
He's lost pretty much half of his games in charge.
Yeah.
So he's not even getting draws there. I mean, his record in Sweden, not massively great either in his last job. 26 matches, 7 wins, 5 draws and 14 defeats. So he's lost more than half of his games there.
But to be fair, it was bang in the middle of COVID, so it probably wasn't ideal for him.
No, it would. I imagine it would be tough for him. I imagine it would be tough.
Especially being the Englishman abroad type thing.
Yeah, so it can't have been easy, that. But there again, you back yourself as a manager and don't get the results. It's it's just the way it is. As we mentioned just there, obviously he was sacked from his last job in Sweden with a record that was actually poorer than Beech's. So it's a little bit one of those ones. And I know all managers are going to fail at some point in their careers. It's inevitable, isn't it? Not everyone's going to be a Sir Alex Ferguson or a Pep Guardiola. So you're going to have to take that sometimes. You're going to have to have a chance. Another point here, I mean, as much as he's coming into only his second full-time EFL managerial role, he's 55 years old. He's not young. He's not some up-and-coming coach that's come out of nowhere. I mean, arguably Beech wasn't here. Beech was 45 when you appointed him. It's not like appointing a Danny Granger, is it? I suppose, or even a Paul Simpson when he first got the job with us. Yeah. It's Neil McDonald was 40, I think, when he got the job with us as well. It's a lot older. It's not. Yeah, it's one of those ones you think.
Yeah.
Is it arguably as big a risk as going with someone who's younger and got fresh ideas and new? I don't know. I mean, his last managerial role was over a decade ago in the EFL at Bristol City. So, yeah. Judging by the initial reaction as well, Dan, not getting the fans back on board initially. I don't think there's too much.
I don't think it's towards him. It's more towards the process and David Holdsworth and the board, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. That's the issue fans have got.
I think most fans will give him benefit of a doubt, because, like I say, you've got to give a manager a clean slate when he comes in, unless you have a certain reason to have an intense hatred of him. And I can't think of any possible reason why any Carlisle fan would have an intense dislike of Keith Millen.
No,
so
exactly.
All we can do as fans is wish him luck and get behind the team.
Yeah, definitely. And as the final sort of Connor mentioned here, big question over what his knowledge of League Two is. I know he'll obviously done his little bit of research in terms of getting the job, in terms of the interview process, but he's not been in England for 2 seasons. He's not really been involved at this level for quite a long time. It's. I'd seriously question.
They did. I think it was Andrew Jenkins did suggest that they were impressed with his knowledge, though. So he's maybe one of those who does keep his eye on the ball.
Well, there you go. Maybe he will. Maybe he will then. Just to round it up, Dan, let's look at the task in hand for the new gaffer. Upcoming fixtures make it a very tough start for him, though, don't they? That's the first thing you think when you look at these games. I mean, first up, this weekend, a team that I predicted would struggle a bit this season, and I look a bit stupid now, don't I?
Ditto.
Bit like Mike with his Tranmere to struggle prediction. Northampton Town, away from home, currently in 3rd place,
and on a good run.
On a really good run, yeah. That's not a bit of a baptism of fire. I think it's fair to say that one.
I mean, he's touchwood. He's got a gimme the week after.
Well, even that
he should have.
He should horse him in the FA Cup, but that's a banana skin. And as a new manager, I'd be looking at that thinking, "Oh Christ!" The last thing I want is what you should be saying to the team in that game is, "Let's get a nice early lead here and just kill the game off quickly. No panicking, no just sitting back, whatever. Let's get at them early on and get a goal in the first 10 minutes, get a second in the first 20 minutes, and then calm down, and then you can just play your game, and then you can try different things out at that point, can't you?"
Yeah, and then it's the big one.
Yeah, I mean, they're only 13th place, Barrow, but they're doing pretty well this season. You know, that they've been up round about the playoffs. They've sort of dropped off a little bit in recent weeks.
It's more about who we're playing and what it means, doesn't it?
I saw a tweet from them today. They've sold 900 tickets already for the game. I mean, bear in mind the game's still, 2.5 weeks away. You know, there's every chance they're going to sell 1,500 for that one. So, to be fair, that's more. That's about half their average attendance. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Only a small club, aren't they? And then the remaining 3 fixtures in November, you've got Exeter away,
which is somewhere we never do well at much, is it?
No, I mean Richard Offiong's night of memory aside, they're in 4th place, so they're doing well. And Harrogate at home, 5th place. I mean, you'd hope if we'd maybe put a couple of results together by then, we can be a bit more confident going to that one. It's a home game, but they're having a brilliant season. They really are. And then finally, Walsall, who've picked up a little bit of form last few games, I think. They're in 14th place when we play them. I think is that away or is it home? I'm not 100% actually. I put away on the list.
I think it's away.
Possibly, it's.
No, I think it's at home.
I think you're right, actually. Yes.
I miss Harrogate at home because I'm on holiday.
And I've just remembered. Yes, it is at home because I missed that.
I come back the day before Walsall.
Well, you're going to be our correspondent for that game then, Dan, because I'm missing that game as well because I'm at a gig in Edinburgh that night. So, so there you go. So we'll be. You'll be the one telling us how things went and whether it's Millen out by then or Millen is our saviour. Yeah. You'll never know. I think that's about it, Dan. I don't think there's a huge amount else to cover this episode. Anything else you want to say about the new gaffer?
No, just like say, as always, clean slate. Wish him the best of luck. We have, whilst we've been setting up this quick episode, we've contacted a couple of other people in football and we're hoping to get a couple of 5-minute interviews on his appointment for the proper episode later in the week.
Absolutely. And what we'll do as well is when we post this up on Twitter and Facebook, we'll also post like a tweet and a Facebook post asking you for your views, and we'll share a few of those on the episode later this week as well. Probably be quite a packed one, that one. We maybe won't focus too much on Northampton themselves, or maybe we'll try and trim a few bits back. I mean, to be honest, the Oldham review bit's going to be very short because there's not much to talk about in it, really. We might even bin that off for 1 week just to cover a few bits like this. So, so there you go, Dan. Thanks for joining me. And like I 100% agree with you. Wish Keith all the best. Jan, really hope you can turn things around quickly and get us moving up the table before Christmas, and then we can have a real good go in the second half of the campaign. Thanks as usual. Actually, obviously we didn't mention this episode because it's not really a normal episode, but thanks again to the London branch who are sponsoring us this season and helping us out with our hosting costs. Remember, you can subscribe to the podcast on all good podcast apps, with Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, Acast, anywhere like that. And remember to give us a review as well on any of those apps if you can. We had some really good reviews in lately. We're really pleased with it. We'll also, finally, we'll get around to posting that supporter link as well thing. So what you can do basically is just chup us a couple of quid if you want. You know, we're not demanding it, we're not expecting it. We just think it would be really helpful if you could. It would help with some of our online studio costs and things like that. Basically, it'd be really great if you could. We're on all the social medias, Twitter at Brunton Bugle, Facebook, just search for Brunton Bugle, and we're on the Be Just on Fear Not Facebook group, and obviously on the message board, thecrumbians.net as well. And I think that's about it, Dan, isn't it? We'll also be back later in the week to preview the Northampton game and look ahead to Keith's first game in charge and try and it's going to be very difficult to second guess what team he'll pick. You never know, but we'll have to wait and see. Dan, thanks once again for joining me. Thanks everyone for listening, and up the Blues.
Up the Blues.